There is something no one tells you when you are young. No one sits you down and explains this. Not your teachers, not your parents, not the people you admire. And because no one tells you, you spend years learning it the hard way. You spend years chasing attention, chasing approval, chasing the feeling of being wanted. You bend yourself to fit other people's expectations. You soften your voice so others feel comfortable. You say yes when everything inside you is screaming no. You shrink yourself because somewhere deep down you believe that being smaller makes you more acceptable, and for a while it works. People seem to like you. They keep you around. They respond to your messages. They invite you to things, and you feel something that resembles belonging. But it is not real belonging. It is borrowed. It is conditional. And deep down you know it. You know it because the moment you stop performing, the moment you stop bending, the moment you stop chasing, the attention disappears. The people you thought cared start to fade, and you are left wondering what went wrong. But nothing went wrong. That is the truth. Nothing went wrong because nothing was ever truly built. You were not valued. You were tolerated. And there is an enormous difference between those two things. Being tolerated means people keep you around because you are convenient, because you are easy, because you do not challenge them, do not require anything of them, do not hold them to any standard. You are simply there, present but not powerful, visible but not vital. Being valued is something else entirely. When you are valued, people feel your presence even when you are silent. They notice when you are missing. They do not take your time for granted because they understand, even if they cannot fully articulate it, that you are not someone who gives yourself away cheaply. You are not someone who will always be there regardless of how you are treated, and that is what this audiobook is about. Not tricks, not manipulation, not games designed to make people chase you. This is not about learning how to control other people's emotions. This is not about becoming cold or distant or calculating. None of that leads anywhere meaningful. This audiobook is about something deeper, something quieter, something that most people overlook because it does not make noise. It is about becoming someone whose value is so clear, so consistent, so grounded that people do not just notice you. They feel something shift when you are no longer around. Not because you demanded it, not because you engineered it, but because you built something within yourself that cannot be easily found in someone else. Think about the people in your own life who carry that kind of weight, not the loudest ones, not the ones constantly seeking attention or validation. Think about the ones who are calm, steady, present, the ones who do not chase anyone but somehow draw people in without effort, the ones who hold their ground quietly, the ones who make you feel something simply by being in the room. Those people did not wake up one day and decide to be magnetic. They became that way through choices, daily choices, choices about how they treat themselves, choices about what they tolerate, choices about where they place their energy and their time. That is the kind of transformation this audiobook is designed to guide you through. You are not going to learn how to perform value. You are going to learn how to become it. And there is an important distinction there. Performing value is exhausting. It requires constant effort, constant monitoring of how others perceive you, constant adjustment. It is unsustainable, and people can feel it. They may not be able to name it, but they sense when someone is trying too hard. They sense when someone's confidence is a costume rather than a foundation. Becoming value is different. It is slower, quieter, less dramatic, but it lasts. And once it takes root inside you, it changes everything. Not just how others see you, but how you see yourself. How you move through the world, how you make decisions, how you handle conflict, how you choose relationships, how you walk away from what does not serve you. By the end of this audiobook, you will understand something that most people never fully grasp. You will understand that your value was never meant to be proven. It was meant to be built, carefully, deliberately, from the inside out. And once it is built, you will not need to convince anyone of your worth. They will feel it. Let that idea sit with you for a moment. Let it settle. Because everything that follows builds on that single, quiet truth. You do not chase value, you construct it. And then you let it speak for itself. Before you can understand how to become irreplaceable, you need to understand why most people are not. And this is not said to be harsh. It is said because it is honest. And honesty, even when it is uncomfortable, is where real growth begins. Most people are easily replaced. Not because they are bad people. Not because they lack intelligence or talent or ambition. They are replaceable because they have never taken the time to develop the things that make a person truly rare. They blend in. They go along. They adapt to every room they enter without ever asking whether that room deserves their presence. They become echoes of whoever they are standing next to. And because of that, they become interchangeable. One version swapped for another without anyone really noticing the difference. This is a painful realization, but it is a necessary one. Think about it from a simple, honest perspective. If you removed yourself from someone's life today, completely and without warning, would they feel it? Not just notice it, but feel it. Would there be a gap that could not easily be filled by someone else? Would something essential be missing? For most people, the honest answer is no, and that answer is not a reflection of their inherent worth as a human being. Every person has worth simply by existing, but personal value, the kind that makes people lean in, the kind that creates loyalty and respect and genuine connection, that kind of value is built. It does not come automatically. So why are so many people easy to replace? The first reason is that most people define themselves through others. They do not have a clear sense of who they are outside of their relationships. They become what they think other people want. They mirror emotions. They adjust opinions. They change direction based on who is watching. And while this may seem like flexibility or adaptability, it is actually the absence of identity. When you do not know who you are, you cannot offer anything unique. You become a reflection, and reflections disappear the moment the other person walks away. The second reason is that most people give themselves away too easily. They offer their time, their energy, their attention, their loyalty without any requirement. They do not wait to see if the other person has earned access to those things. They hand them over immediately, hoping that generosity will be rewarded with love or acceptance or belonging. But generosity without discernment is not generosity. It is desperation wearing a kind face, and people can feel the difference. When you give without standards, you train others to expect everything from you while offering nothing in return. You become a convenience, an emotional utility, always available, always accommodating, always there, and things that are always available are never cherished. The third reason is a lack of personal development. Many people stop growing once they reach a certain level of comfort. They settle into routines. They stop challenging themselves. They stop learning. They stop refining their character. And over time, they become stagnant, predictable in the worst way. Not predictable in the sense of reliability, which is a virtue, but predictable in the sense of emptiness. There is nothing new beneath the surface. No depth to discover, no evolution to witness. People are drawn to growth. They are drawn to those who are becoming something. When you stop becoming, you stop being interesting. Not in a superficial sense, but in a deeply human one. People want to be around others who challenge them, who inspire them, who make them think and feel and question. If you are not doing that for yourself, you cannot do it for anyone else. The fourth reason is an addiction to validation. This one runs deep and is more common than most people would ever admit. Many people structure their entire lives around being approved of. Every decision, every conversation, every relationship is filtered through one question. Will this make them like me? And when your life is built around that question, you lose yourself entirely. You do not speak your truth. You do not hold your boundaries. You do not pursue what matters to you. You pursue what you think will earn you applause. And the applause may come, but it is never for the real you. It is for the version of you that you created to be palatable. That version is replaceable, because it was never real in the first place. The fifth reason, and perhaps the most important, is that most people do not respect themselves enough to demand respect from others. They accept poor treatment. They forgive without accountability. They return to situations and people that diminish them. They tolerate disrespect because they are afraid that setting a standard will result in being alone. And so they stay. They stay in friendships that drain them. They stay in relationships that belittle them. They stay in environments that do not honor their worth. And every time they stay, they send a message, not just to the other person, but to themselves. The message is simple: I am not worth more than this. When you send that message often enough, you start to believe it. And when you believe it, you act accordingly. You shrink. You accommodate. You disappear into the background of your own life. That is why people are easily replaced. Not because of some inherent flaw, but because of patterns. Patterns of self-neglect. Patterns of over-giving. Patterns of avoiding the difficult, necessary work of building a self that stands on its own. The good news is that patterns can be broken. The even better news is that you are already in the process of breaking them. You are here. You are listening. You are paying attention. And that matters more than you might realize right now. Because the shift from being replaceable to being irreplaceable does not require a dramatic reinvention. It does not require you to become someone you are not. It requires you to become more of who you already are. More intentional, more grounded, more clear about what you stand for and what you will not stand for. It requires you to stop performing and start building. And building begins with understanding what real value actually looks like. Most people have a distorted understanding of what makes a person valuable. They think value comes from appearance, from status, from how many people want to be around you, from how much attention you attract, from how entertaining or impressive or successful you seem on the surface. And while those things may create temporary interest, they do not create lasting value. They create curiosity, maybe. They create envy. They create a kind of social magnetism that fades the moment something newer or shinier comes along. Real value is not shiny. It is not loud. It does not announce itself. Real value is felt. It is experienced over time. It reveals itself in the small moments, in the way you handle pressure, in the way you treat people who can do nothing for you, in the way you show up when it is inconvenient, in the quiet consistency of your character when no one is watching. Let that be the foundation. Real value is not what you project. It is what you embody. And it starts with something that most people overlook entirely: discipline. Not the flashy, motivational kind. Not the kind that looks good in a social media post. The quiet kind. The unglamorous kind. The kind that gets you out of bed when you do not feel like it. The kind that keeps you working when no one is paying attention. The kind that says no to distractions that feel good in the moment but cost you everything over time. Discipline is the backbone of personal value because it is the clearest indicator of self-governance. When you are disciplined, you are not at the mercy of your impulses. You are not a passenger in your own life. You are making choices, real choices, about how you spend your time and your energy. And those choices, compounded over months and years, create a version of you that stands apart. Most people are undisciplined. That is not a judgment. It is an observation. Most people follow their emotions. They do what feels good. They avoid what feels hard, and as a result, they remain where they are, unchanged, unchallenged, comfortable but unfulfilled. When you choose discipline, you are choosing to be different. Not better than anyone else, but more developed than the version of yourself that would exist without it. And that development is something people can sense. They may not know what it is right away, but they feel it. They feel the steadiness, the groundedness, the sense that you are someone who has done the work. The second element of real value is clarity. Clarity of thought, clarity of purpose, clarity of values. When you are clear about who you are, what you want, and what you stand for, you move through the world differently. You do not second-guess yourself constantly. You do not look to others for direction. You do not waver in the face of pressure. And that kind of clarity is rare. Genuinely rare. Most people are confused. Not because they are unintelligent, but because they have never taken the time to sit with themselves long enough to figure out what actually matters to them. They adopt the values of their environment. They chase the goals that society tells them to chase. They define success the way someone else defined it for them. And so they move through life with a vague sense of unease, never quite sure whether they are heading in the right direction. You can feel the difference between someone who has clarity and someone who does not. The person with clarity speaks with conviction, not arrogance, not rigidity. Conviction, they know what they believe, and they are not easily swayed. They do not need consensus to feel confident in their position. They have thought about things. They have examined themselves. And they have arrived at conclusions that they can stand behind. That kind of person is not easy to replace, because what they offer is not just companionship or entertainment or utility. What they offer is a sense of direction, a sense of groundedness, a feeling that you are standing next to someone who knows where they are going. The third element of real value is emotional stability. This does not mean being emotionless. It does not mean suppressing what you feel. It means having the ability to experience your emotions without being controlled by them. It means being able to sit with discomfort without reacting impulsively. It means being someone who does not fall apart at the first sign of adversity. Emotional stability is one of the most attractive qualities a person can possess, and not just in romantic relationships, in friendships, in professional settings, in families, in every form of human connection. People gravitate toward those who are emotionally steady because those people feel safe. Not safe in a passive, weak sense, but safe in the sense that you can rely on them. You can trust them. You can count on them to be the same person regardless of circumstances. When you are emotionally unstable, you become unpredictable. People walk on eggshells around you. They do not know which version of you they are going to encounter, and over time they pull away, not necessarily out of cruelty but out of self-preservation. They cannot afford the emotional cost of being close to someone who changes with the weather. When you are emotionally stable, people relax around you. They open up. They trust you with more. They lean on you because they know you can handle it, and that is a kind of value that money cannot buy and status cannot fabricate. The fourth element is integrity. Integrity is doing what you say you will do. It is honoring your word even when it is inconvenient. It is being honest when honesty is uncomfortable. It is living in alignment with your values, not just when it is easy, but when it costs you something. This sounds simple. It is not. Most people compromise their integrity constantly. They make promises they do not keep. They say one thing and do another. They present themselves in ways that do not match who they actually are, and every time they do this, they erode their own sense of self. They chip away at the foundation of their identity, and people notice. You may think that small compromises go unnoticed. They do not. People track your behavior over time, even if they do not consciously realize it. They remember when you said you would call and did not. They remember when you made a commitment and backed out. They remember when you claimed to believe something and then acted in direct contradiction to that belief. And each of those small moments adds up. Over time, your integrity becomes either your greatest asset or your greatest liability. It either makes you someone people trust deeply, or it makes you someone people keep at a distance. When you live with integrity, you do not need to convince anyone of your character. Your actions do it for you, and that silent, consistent demonstration of who you are is one of the most powerful forms of value you can offer. The fifth element is presence, not the kind of presence that comes from being loud or dominating a room, the kind that comes from being fully engaged, from being truly there, from listening when someone speaks, not just waiting for your turn to talk, from making people feel seen and heard and understood without performing. Presence is one of the rarest things in modern life. Almost no one is truly present anymore. People are distracted, divided, half in the room and half somewhere else. Their eyes on their phone, their mind on the next thing, their attention fragmented. When you are present, you stand out, not because you are trying to, but because the experience of being truly seen by another person is so unusual that it creates an impact. People remember it. They remember how it felt to be around you. They remember the sense that you were actually there, and they carry that feeling with them long after the conversation is over. Presence is not a technique. It is a way of being. It is the result of inner calm, of not needing to be anywhere else, of not being driven by anxiety or restlessness. It is the natural expression of someone who has done the work to be at peace with themselves. And when you are at peace with yourself, others feel that peace too. It becomes part of what you offer the world, whether you intend it to or not. These 5 elements, discipline, clarity, emotional stability, integrity, and presence, are the foundation of real personal value, not the superficial kind, not the kind that impresses strangers at parties, the kind that makes people feel something deep and real when they are around you. The kind that is not easily found in someone else. The kind that makes people fear losing you, not because you have made them afraid, but because they understand that what you bring into their life is genuinely rare. And here is what makes this even more powerful. These 5 elements are all within your control. You do not need anyone's permission to develop them. You do not need anyone's approval. You do not need external circumstances to change. You can begin building them today, right where you are, with whatever you have. That is the beauty of true value. It does not depend on the world cooperating. It depends on you deciding, quietly and firmly, that you are going to become someone worth knowing, not for anyone else's sake, for your own. Because when you build real value, you do not just change how others see you. You change how you see yourself. And that is where everything shifts. That inner shift, that moment when you look in the mirror and know that you are someone of substance, that moment changes the trajectory of your entire life. It changes the relationships you accept. It changes the standards you hold. It changes the way you walk into a room. It changes the way you walk away from one. And none of it requires noise. None of it requires announcement. It simply requires you doing the work, day after day, choice after choice, until the value you have built becomes undeniable, not to the world, to yourself. There is a truth that most people spend their entire lives avoiding, and it is this. The way other people treat you is almost always a reflection of how you treat yourself. Not always. There are exceptions. There are cruel people in the world who will mistreat you regardless of what you do. But in the majority of cases, in the relationships and interactions and dynamics that define your daily life, the standard you set for yourself becomes the standard others follow. If you accept disrespect, you will receive more of it. If you tolerate being ignored, you will be ignored more often. If you allow people to take you for granted, they will take you for granted with increasing confidence. Not because they are evil, but because human beings naturally adjust their behavior based on what is permitted. This is not a comfortable truth. It places responsibility squarely on your shoulders, and most people do not want that responsibility. They want to believe that they are victims of circumstance, that the people around them are simply unkind, that they have no control over how they are treated. But you do have control. Not over other people's behavior, but over what you allow into your life, over what you accept, over what you walk away from, over where you draw the line. And that is what self-respect is. It is the line. Self-respect is not arrogance. It is not thinking you are better than anyone else. It is not walking around with a chip on your shoulder, daring people to cross you. That is insecurity dressed up as strength. Real self-respect is quiet, it is calm. It is the deep, unshakable knowing that you deserve to be treated with decency, that your time has value, that your feelings matter, that your presence is not something to be taken lightly. And when you carry that knowing inside you, it changes everything. It changes the way you communicate. It changes the way you respond to disrespect. It changes the way you enter and exit relationships. It changes the energy you bring into every room. People who respect themselves do not need to announce it. They do not need to lecture others about their boundaries. They do not need to make dramatic declarations. Their self-respect is visible in the way they carry themselves, in the way they speak, in the way they choose to engage, and, just as importantly, in the way they choose not to. Let that sink in for a moment. Self-respect is not just about what you do. It is about what you refuse to do. It is about the things you will not tolerate, the compromises you will not make, the behavior you will not accept from yourself or from anyone else. And this is where standards come in. Standards are the practical expression of self-respect. They are the guidelines you create for your own life, not for anyone else's life. For yours, they define what you will give your energy to, what kind of relationships you will participate in, what kind of treatment you will walk away from, what kind of person you are committed to being. Most people have no standards. Or more accurately, most people have standards that are so low they might as well not exist. They accept whatever comes their way. They tolerate whatever behavior people direct at them. They say yes to things that make them uncomfortable. They stay in situations that diminish them, and they call it being flexible or understanding or patient. But flexibility without a foundation is just weakness. Understanding without boundaries is just passivity. And patience without standards is just endurance, the kind that slowly eats away at your self-worth until there is nothing left. Having standards does not mean you are rigid. It does not mean you are difficult. It does not mean you refuse to give people grace. It means you have decided, consciously and deliberately, what you are willing to accept and what you are not, and you honor that decision even when it is hard, especially when it is hard. Because here is the thing about standards. They are only meaningful when they are tested. Anyone can have standards when everything is going well, when the relationship is new, when the friendship is easy, when there is no pressure. But what happens when someone crosses the line? What happens when someone takes your kindness for weakness? What happens when maintaining your standard means losing someone? That is where most people fold. That is where most people abandon their own boundaries because the fear of loss is greater than their commitment to themselves. And every time you fold, you send yourself a message. You tell yourself that the other person's behavior is more important than your self-respect. You tell yourself that keeping the peace is more important than keeping your dignity. You tell yourself that being alone is worse than being disrespected. And those messages accumulate. They build a foundation of self-betrayal that becomes the lens through which you see yourself and the world. You start believing that you are not worth the standard you once set. You lower the bar. Then you lower it again, and eventually there is no bar at all. But it does not have to be that way. And the fact that you are listening to this audiobook tells me that something inside you already knows that. Something inside you is tired of lowering the bar. Something inside you is ready to raise it, not out of anger or resentment, but out of respect. Respect for yourself. So what does it look like, practically, to live with self-respect and standards? It looks like saying no when you mean no, without guilt and without excessive explanation. You do not owe anyone a 5-paragraph justification for protecting your own time and energy. It looks like walking away from conversations that feel disrespectful, Even when walking away means standing alone, it looks like not responding to every provocation. Not every slight deserves your attention. Not every rude comment requires a response. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply choose not to engage. It looks like being honest about what you need. Not hinting, not hoping someone will figure it out. Being clear, being direct, and being willing to accept the outcome, whatever it is. It looks like refusing to chase people. If someone wants to be in your life, they will make an effort. If they do not, that is all the information you need. You do not need to beg for someone's attention to prove that you care. Your presence is the offer. What they do with it is their choice. It looks like holding yourself accountable. Self-respect is not just about how others treat you. It is about how you treat yourself. It is about keeping the promises you make to yourself, showing up for yourself, doing the things you said you would do. Being someone you can trust, because if you cannot trust yourself, you cannot expect anyone else to trust you either. Self-respect also looks like being willing to be misunderstood. This is one of the hardest parts. When you start setting standards, not everyone will appreciate it. Some people will call you cold. Some will call you difficult. Some will accuse you of having too high expectations. And that is fine, because their discomfort with your standards is not your responsibility. People who are used to you having no boundaries will resist when you start creating them. That resistance is not a sign that you are doing something wrong. It is a sign that you are doing something different. And different, in this case, means healthier. You do not need everyone to understand your standards. You just need to understand them yourself. And when you do, something remarkable happens. The people who were only in your life because you were easy to take advantage of start to fall away. And the people who genuinely respect you, who value you for who you actually are, start to come closer. Not because you manipulated the situation, but because you created space for something real by removing everything that was not. This is the power of self-respect. It filters. It clarifies. It reveals who belongs in your life and who was only there because you were too afraid to ask for more. And every time you honor your standards, every time you choose yourself instead of settling, you reinforce a belief that becomes stronger and stronger over time. The belief that you are worth the standard you have set. That belief is the foundation of everything. It is the foundation of your confidence, your peace, your ability to walk through the world with your head held high, not because you think you are perfect, but because you know you are honest with yourself about who you are and what you deserve. And that honesty, that grounded, quiet, unshakable honesty, is what makes people take notice. Not because you are performing strength, but because you are living it, every single day. In the choices you make and the ones you refuse to, self-respect is not something you declare. It is something you demonstrate. And when you demonstrate it long enough, it becomes part of who you are. It becomes the air around you, the tone of your voice, the way you look people in the eye, the way you walk away without looking back. And people will feel it. They will feel it in the way they speak to you. They will feel it in the way they approach you. They will feel it in the weight they give your words and your presence. Because a person who respects themselves commands respect without ever asking for it. They do not need to demand it. They do not need to fight for it. They simply live in a way that makes disrespect feel inappropriate. And that is worth more than any strategy. More than any tactic, more than any trick designed to make someone value you. You do not make someone value you. You become someone who values yourself. And the rest follows. There is a paradox at the heart of human relationships that most people never fully understand, and it is this. The more you need someone, the less they value you, and the less you need someone, the more they lean in. This is not cynical. This is not a manipulation strategy. This is simply how human connection works at its deepest level. People are drawn to those who are whole. People are drawn to those who do not need them to feel complete. And people pull away, slowly and sometimes unconsciously, from those who cling. This is not about pretending you do not care. This is not about playing games or acting distant or withholding your emotions to create anxiety. Those are tactics, and tactics always fail in the long run because they are built on dishonesty. This is about genuine detachment, the kind that comes not from indifference, but from inner fullness. The kind that says, I want you in my life, but I do not need you in my life to be okay. That distinction changes everything, because when you need someone, you become dependent. And dependency, no matter how well you dress it up, creates imbalance. It puts the other person in a position of power, not because they want it, but because you have given it to them. You have made them responsible for your happiness, your peace, your sense of self. And that is a burden no one can carry for long. When you are dependent, your behavior changes in ways you may not even notice. You check your phone more often. You analyze their tone. You read into silences. You adjust yourself to maintain their approval. You become less of who you are and more of what you think they want. And with every adjustment, you lose a piece of yourself. Over time, this creates a dynamic that is exhausting for both of you. You become increasingly anxious. They become increasingly withdrawn. And the thing you feared most, losing them, becomes more and more likely precisely because of how tightly you are holding on. Detachment is the antidote, not cold detachment, not the kind where you shut down emotionally and refuse to let anyone in. That is not strength. That is protection. And protection, while sometimes necessary, is not the same as freedom. True detachment is warm, it is open, it is emotionally available. But it is also rooted. It is grounded in something that does not depend on the other person's behavior. It is grounded in your relationship with yourself. When you are truly detached, you can love someone without losing yourself. You can care deeply without becoming desperate. You can enjoy someone's company without feeling devastated by their absence. And that creates a dynamic that is profoundly attractive. Not attractive in a superficial, fleeting sense. Attractive in a way that feels safe, grounded, and real. Because when you are not desperate, you are free to be honest. When you are not afraid of losing someone, you are free to show up as who you actually are. You do not perform. You do not pretend. You do not contort yourself into a shape that you think will keep them around. And that authenticity, that willingness to be fully yourself without attachment to the outcome, is one of the most compelling things a human being can offer. So how do you cultivate this kind of detachment? How do you build a life that does not collapse when one person steps out of it? It starts with developing a deep, personal relationship with yourself. This is not a cliché. This is a practice. And it is one that most people neglect. Developing a relationship with yourself means spending time alone, willingly and comfortably. It means knowing what you enjoy independent of anyone else. It means having interests, passions, pursuits, and goals that are entirely your own. It means being able to sit in silence without reaching for your phone or turning on noise to fill the gap. When you are comfortable alone, you carry a certain energy into your relationships. An energy of sufficiency. An energy that says, I am here because I choose to be, not because I have no alternative. And that energy is magnetic, not because it plays hard to get, but because it communicates something essential about who you are. It communicates completeness. The second part of cultivating detachment is learning to manage your emotions without outsourcing them. Most people use other people as emotional regulators. They feel anxious, so they call someone. They feel sad, so they seek comfort. They feel uncertain, so they look for reassurance. And while there is nothing wrong with leaning on others during difficult times, there is a critical difference between leaning on someone and depending on them. Leaning is temporary. It is a choice. It implies that you can stand on your own, but appreciate the support. Depending is constant. It is a need. It implies that without the other person, you cannot function. When you learn to regulate your own emotions When you develop the ability to sit with discomfort without needing someone to fix it for you, you gain a kind of inner stability that changes every relationship you have. People stop feeling burdened by your emotions and start feeling invited into your world. There is a warmth to that, a freedom, a lightness. The third part is releasing the need for control. Many people confuse attachment with love, but attachment is often just fear wearing a softer mask. The fear of being alone, the fear of being forgotten, the fear of being replaced, and that fear leads to controlling behavior, checking up on people, needing to know where they are, needing constant reassurance, needing to feel chosen over and over again. But real connection does not require control. It requires trust. Trust in the other person, yes, but more importantly, trust in yourself. Trust that you will be okay regardless of what happens. Trust that if someone leaves, you will survive. Trust that your worth does not diminish because someone fails to see it. When you release the need to control, you create room for real intimacy. People feel free around you. They do not feel monitored or tested. They feel invited to be themselves, just as you are being yourself. And that mutual freedom is the foundation of every healthy, lasting relationship. The fourth part of detachment is accepting impermanence. This is the hardest part, because we are wired to seek permanence. We want things to last. We want people to stay. We want relationships to endure. And when they do not, it feels like failure. But impermanence is not failure, it is reality. People change. Circumstances shift. Relationships evolve. Some connections are meant to last a lifetime, and some are meant to teach you something and then move on. And when you accept that, when you truly accept it, you stop gripping. You stop trying to force things to last beyond their natural life. And you start appreciating things for what they are in the moment, without the desperate need for them to be forever. This does not make you cold. It makes you wise. It makes you present. It makes you capable of loving fully without being destroyed by loss. And that capacity, the capacity to love without clinging, is one of the most valuable traits a person can develop. When you live with this kind of detachment, something interesting happens. People stop taking you for granted. Not because you have played a game, not because you have made them insecure, but because they sense that you are not a permanent fixture by default. They sense that your presence in their life is a choice, one that you make freely and that you could unmake just as freely. And that awareness, that quiet, unspoken awareness, creates respect. It creates appreciation. It creates the kind of attention that does not need to be asked for, because it arises naturally from the knowledge that you are not someone who will always be there regardless. You are not a guarantee. You are a gift, and gifts are cherished precisely because they are given freely, not because they are owed. This is the power of detachment, not pushing people away, but releasing your grip on them, not withdrawing love, but offering it from a place of wholeness rather than hunger. Not pretending you do not care, but caring from a foundation so strong that your caring does not compromise your sense of self. Independence is not about isolation. It is about sufficiency. It is about building a life that is rich and full and meaningful on its own, so that when someone enters it, they are adding to something already beautiful rather than filling a void. That is what makes you valuable. Not the promise that you will always stay, but the quiet truth that you do not have to. And the people who understand that, the people who sense that your independence is real and not a performance, those are the people who will hold you closest. Not out of fear, but out of genuine respect and admiration for who you are. Because at the end of the day, people do not fear losing those who need them. They fear losing those who do not. Those who are there by choice. Those who bring something whole and grounded and real into their life. Be that person, not for anyone else, for yourself. And watch how the entire dynamic shifts. There is a quality that is so underestimated, so overlooked, so rarely discussed in conversations about personal value that it almost seems invisible. But it is not invisible. It is the quiet engine behind every meaningful relationship, every respected reputation, and every lasting form of trust ever built. That quality is consistency, not excitement, not intensity, not the dramatic highs that make for compelling stories but rarely make for stable lives. Consistency, the simple, steady, unremarkable act of showing up the same way, day after day, regardless of mood or circumstance. It does not sound impressive, and that is exactly why it is so powerful. Because almost no one does it. Think about the people in your life. Think about the ones who are always changing, enthusiastic one day, distant the next, reliable one week, absent the following, full of promises when things are easy, nowhere to be found when things get hard. You know people like this. Everyone does. And while they may be entertaining, while they may bring moments of excitement, they do not bring trust. They do not bring the deep, quiet sense of safety that comes from knowing someone is exactly who they say they are, all the time, not just when it is convenient. Now think about the opposite. Think about the person who always shows up, not with fireworks, not with grand gestures, just there, steady, present, doing what they said they would do, being who they said they would be, not just once, not just when they feel like it. Every single time. That person is rare, and that rarity is what creates value, because consistency is the proof of character. Anyone can be kind once. Anyone can be generous once. Anyone can show up once. But doing it again and again and again, especially when it is difficult, especially when no one is watching, especially when you receive nothing in return, that is what separates the valuable from the forgettable. Consistency in your behavior tells people something crucial about you. It tells them that you are trustworthy, not in the abstract, but in the practical, everyday, lived experience sense. It tells them that your words and your actions are aligned, that you are not one person today and a different person tomorrow, that they can rely on you, not as a concept, but as a reality, and trust, real trust, is the most valuable currency in human relationships. More valuable than charm, more valuable than talent, more valuable than intelligence. Because without trust, nothing else matters. You can be the most brilliant person in the room, but if people do not trust you, your brilliance is irrelevant. You can be the most generous person, but if people cannot count on you, your generosity is hollow. Trust is built slowly and destroyed quickly, and the only material it is built from is consistency. Consider how this applies to your own life. Consider the friendships you value most. Are they with the people who are the most exciting? Or are they with the people who are the most reliable? The ones you know you can call at any hour. The ones who do not disappear when things get uncomfortable. The ones who have proven, through repeated action, that they are who they claim to be. Almost always, the people you trust most are the ones who have been the most consistent. Not the most dramatic, not the most impressive, just the most steady. This is the lesson. If you want to be valued, be consistent, not in a rigid, inflexible way, not in a way that prevents growth or change, but in the core things, in your character, in your integrity, in your emotional presence, in the way you treat people, in the promises you make and keep. Let your consistency become your signature. When you are consistently kind, people learn that your kindness is real. When you are consistently honest, people learn that your words can be trusted. When you are consistently present, people learn that your attention is genuine. And those lessons, reinforced over time through repeated experience, create a bond that is almost impossible to break. This is why consistency increases your value. It removes uncertainty. And uncertainty is one of the most exhausting things in human relationships. People do not want to wonder who they are going to get when they call you. They do not want to guess whether you are going to show up. They do not want to manage the anxiety of not knowing if your behavior today reflects who you actually are or just who you happen to be in this moment. When you are consistent, you eliminate that uncertainty. You become a known quantity, and that may sound boring, but in a world full of unpredictability, Being a known quantity is one of the most comforting and attractive things you can be. This applies to every area of your life. Not just relationships. In your work, consistency is what builds a reputation. It is not the one great project. It is the steady stream of reliable effort. It is showing up prepared. It is delivering on time. It is being the person people know they can count on. That consistency, over time, compounds into something that no single moment of brilliance could match. In your health, consistency is what produces results. Not the intense, unsustainable effort that lasts 2 weeks. The moderate, steady effort that lasts years. The daily walk, the regular meals, the consistent sleep schedule. These are not exciting, but they are effective, and effectiveness over time is its own form of value. In your personal development, consistency is what creates real growth, not the one book you read in a burst of motivation, the daily habit of learning, the regular practice of self-reflection, the ongoing commitment to becoming better, even in small, almost imperceptible ways. Small things, done consistently, create enormous change. Not because any single action is significant, but because the accumulation of those actions over time is unstoppable. And this is where most people fail, not because they cannot do the hard thing, but because they cannot do the simple thing repeatedly. They want the dramatic transformation, the overnight change, the single decision that makes everything different. But life does not work that way. Value does not work that way. Value is built in the quiet repetition of intentional behavior. It is built in the moments no one sees. It is built in the mornings when you keep your commitment to yourself, even though you are tired. It is built in the conversations where you tell the truth, even though it is easier to lie. It is built in the follow-through that most people talk about, but rarely deliver. And here is what makes consistency so powerful as a personal trait. It is something that cannot be faked over time. You can pretend to be many things. You can pretend to be confident, intelligent, generous, even kind. But you cannot pretend to be consistent, because consistency reveals itself only over time. And time exposes everything that is not real. If you are faking consistency, it will crack. The mask will slip. The real pattern will emerge. But if your consistency is genuine, if it comes from a real place of commitment and character, it only grows stronger with time. It becomes more visible, more trusted, more valued, and the people around you will feel it. They will begin to rely on it. They will begin to organize their lives, at least in part, around the knowledge that you are someone who shows up, and that reliance is not a burden. It is a privilege. It is the privilege of being someone others can count on. Someone whose presence in their life is not random or arbitrary, but meaningful and chosen. This is the quiet power of consistency. It does not shout. It does not demand attention. It simply delivers, over and over, without fail. And in a world where so few people can say the same, it becomes one of the most valuable things you can offer. Be consistent. Be steady. Be the person who shows up not just when it is easy, but when it matters. And let that consistency speak for itself. Because it will, louder than anything you could ever say. If there is one thing you take away from this audiobook, let it be this. Value is not a moment. It is a process. It is not something you achieve in a single decision. It is something you build through thousands of them. Quietly, persistently, over time. And that truth, as simple as it sounds, is where most people lose their way. Because we live in a culture that celebrates the instant. The overnight success, the sudden transformation, the single post that goes viral, the one conversation that changes everything. And while those moments exist, they are the exception. They are never the rule. The rule is patience. The rule is showing up every day and doing the work that no one sees. The rule is trusting a process that offers very little feedback in the short term, but produces extraordinary results in the long term. Building your value over time means accepting that you will not see results immediately. It means accepting that the changes happening inside you are real, even when they are invisible to the outside world. It means trusting that the discipline you practice today will become the character you embody tomorrow. Not because someone promised you that, but because that is how growth works. Growth is slow. That is not a flaw. That is its nature. A tree does not grow overnight. It grows season by season, ring by ring, root by root. And by the time it stands tall and strong, most people have forgotten how long it took. They see the result and assume it was always there. But it was not always there. It was built. Slowly. Through years of rain and sun and wind and pressure. You are the same. You are being built. Every challenge you face, every difficult conversation you navigate, every temptation you resist, every commitment you honor, every time you choose what is right over what is easy, you are adding a ring. You are deepening a root. You are becoming stronger. And that strength, built gradually and honestly, is the kind of strength that does not break. It is not brittle. It is not dependent on conditions. It is forged in the real, messy, unglamorous process of living with intention. But here is what makes this process difficult. The gap. There is always a gap between who you are becoming and who you appear to be right now. Between the work you are doing and the results you are seeing. Between the investment you are making in yourself and the recognition you are receiving. That gap is uncomfortable. It can feel unfair. It can make you wonder if any of it matters. And that gap is exactly where most people quit. They do the work for a week, a month, maybe a few months, and when they do not see the dramatic shift they expected, they stop. They conclude that it is not working, that they are not changing, that nothing is happening. But something is happening. Something is always happening when you are consistently doing the right things. You may not see it yet, but the foundation is being laid. The structure is being built. And when the time comes, when the results finally become visible, they will seem sudden to everyone else. But you will know the truth. You will know how long it took, how many unseen hours went into it, how many quiet mornings, how many difficult choices, how many moments where you kept going when every part of you wanted to stop. That is the difference between people who build lasting value and people who chase fleeting attention. The people who build lasting value are willing to work in the dark. They are willing to invest in themselves without immediate reward. They are willing to trust the process, even when the process feels slow and thankless. And they do this not because they are superhuman, but because they understand something that most people do not. They understand that the slow way is the real way. The fast way is the illusion. The fast way gives you the appearance of value without the substance. The slow way gives you the substance, and the appearance eventually follows. So how do you build your value over time? You do it by committing to daily practices that align with the person you want to become. You commit to learning, not in bursts, but as a habit. You read, you listen, you reflect, you expose yourself to ideas that challenge your current thinking. You stay curious, not as a performance, but as a genuine orientation toward the world. And over time, that curiosity becomes wisdom, and wisdom is one of the most valuable things a person can carry. You commit to physical health, not because you are chasing an image, but because taking care of your body is a form of self-respect. When you are physically healthy, you have more energy, more clarity, more resilience. And those things compound over time. A body that has been cared for consistently for years carries a kind of vitality that cannot be manufactured. You commit to emotional growth. You learn to sit with discomfort. You learn to process your emotions instead of running from them. You develop the ability to have difficult conversations without losing yourself. You learn to listen. You learn to forgive. You learn to let go of things that no longer serve you. And each of these lessons, hard-won and deeply personal, adds to the depth of your character. You commit to integrity. You keep your word. You honor your commitments. You tell the truth even when it is inconvenient. You do the right thing even when no one is watching. And over time, these small acts of honesty build a reputation that precedes you. People learn to trust you. And that trust, once established, becomes one of your most powerful assets. You commit to patience. You stop measuring your progress against other people's timelines. You stop comparing your beginning to someone else's middle. You accept that your path is your own and that the timing of your growth is not something you can control. All you can control is the effort, the intention, the daily choice to keep going. And you commit to yourself. Above all else, you commit to yourself, not in a selfish way, not in a way that disregards others, but in a way that honors the truth that you cannot give what you do not have. You cannot offer the world a version of yourself that you have never taken the time to build. You cannot pour from an empty cup, and you cannot demand value from others when you have not invested in your own. Building your value is an act of self-investment. Every book you read, every habit you build, every boundary you enforce, every standard you maintain, every difficult choice you make in favor of your own growth, these are deposits, and they compound, just like interest, just like time. One day, you will look back and realize that the person you have become is almost unrecognizable from the person you used to be. Not because you changed overnight, but because you changed every day, a little at a time, imperceptibly, relentlessly, and the people around you will notice, not all at once, not in a dramatic revelation, but gradually they will begin to see someone different, someone more grounded, more confident, more clear, more present, more honest, more real, and they will not be able to pinpoint when the change happened, because it did not happen, it accumulated, layer by layer, day by day, choice by choice. That is how you build value. Not in a moment, in a lifetime. And the beautiful thing about this approach is that it is never too late to start. You do not need to undo the past. You do not need to make up for lost time. You just need to begin, today, right where you are, with whatever you have, one choice at a time, one day at a time, and trust that the accumulation will speak for itself. By now, you have heard about the building blocks: discipline, self-respect, standards, detachment, consistency, patience. And if you have been listening carefully, you have probably noticed that none of these qualities are flashy. None of them are designed to impress. None of them are loud. That is not a coincidence. The qualities that make a person truly irreplaceable are almost always quiet ones. They are not the things that get noticed first. They are the things that get noticed last and remembered longest. Being someone hard to replace is not about being the most talented person in the room. It is not about being the most attractive. It is not about being the most successful or the most accomplished or the most charismatic. Those things may create initial interest. They may open doors. But they do not keep people. What keeps people is character. What keeps people is the feeling they get when they are around you. The sense that you are someone real, someone honest, someone who is not performing for their benefit, someone who is simply, deeply, authentically themselves. And that is what you have been building throughout this audiobook. Not a persona, not a strategy, a self that is grounded in values rather than validation, a self that has clarity about what it stands for and what it will not tolerate, a self that is emotionally stable, not reactive, a self that brings peace and presence into every interaction, not drama. That kind of self is rare, and because it is rare, it is hard to replace. Think about what it means to be hard to replace. It does not mean that no one else can do what you do. It does not mean that no one else is capable of kindness or honesty or presence. It means that the specific combination of qualities you bring, the particular way you show up, the unique blend of your character and your consistency and your calm, that combination is not easily replicated. No one else has lived your life. No one else has gone through your exact struggles and come out with your exact perspective. No one else has built the specific set of values and habits and ways of being that you have built. And when you lean into that uniqueness, not by performing it, but by simply living it, you become someone who cannot be replaced by just anyone. This is not about ego. This is about honesty. You are a unique expression of human experience. And when you develop that uniqueness with intention, when you refine it through discipline and self-awareness, it becomes something powerful. Not because you are trying to be powerful, but because authenticity, by its very nature, is powerful. Most people spend their lives trying to fit in. They adjust themselves to match expectations. They soften their edges. They hide the parts of themselves that feel too intense or too different or too much. And in doing so, they become generic, palatable, easy to digest but also easy to forget. Becoming someone hard to replace requires the opposite. It requires you to stop editing yourself for comfort, not to become abrasive or inconsiderate, but to become real. To let your values guide you instead of your fear. To say what you actually think instead of what you think people want to hear. To pursue what genuinely matters to you instead of what seems safe or acceptable. This takes courage, not the dramatic kind, the quiet kind, the kind that shows up in small daily choices. The choice to be honest when it would be easier to agree. The choice to walk away when it would be easier to stay. The choice to sit in silence rather than fill the air with noise that means nothing. These choices, made consistently over time, build a person who is unmistakable. Not because they are trying to stand out, but because they have stopped trying to blend in. And when you stop trying to blend in, people begin to notice the specific texture of your character. They notice the way you listen, the way you respond to pressure, the way you hold space for someone without rushing to fix them, the way you carry yourself in moments of uncertainty, the way you stay calm when everyone around you is reacting. Those details are your signature. They are the things that make you, you, and they are the things that people miss when you are gone. Not the grand gestures, not the big moments, the small, consistent, unmistakable ways you move through the world. Becoming someone hard to replace also means becoming someone who does not need to be replaced. Someone who is not constantly leaving or threatening to leave. Someone who is stable and present and committed, because irreplaceability is not just about what you bring, it is about how you stay. People value those who are present. Not just physically, but emotionally. Not just in the good times, but in the difficult ones. When you show up during someone's worst moments with the same steadiness you bring to their best moments, you create a bond that is almost unbreakable. Not because you made them dependent on you, but because you showed them, through action, what real loyalty looks like. And real loyalty is rare. In a world where people leave at the first sign of difficulty, where friendships dissolve over minor disagreements, where relationships end because of temporary discomfort, the person who stays, who works through it, who shows up with patience and calm and honesty, that person becomes essential. Not because they are needed, but because they are valued. There is an important difference between being needed and being valued. Being needed means someone relies on you out of necessity. Being valued means someone cherishes you out of choice. And the kind of irreplaceability you are building is the second kind, the kind that is chosen, the kind that is earned through consistent character, the kind that does not need chains or obligations to sustain it. You want to be chosen, not out of fear or dependence, out of genuine recognition that what you bring into someone's life is meaningful, real, and not easily found elsewhere. And you build that by continuing to do what you have been doing throughout this audiobook, by developing yourself, by honoring your standards, by showing up with integrity, by staying grounded in who you are, even when the world pressures you to be someone else. You do not need to convince anyone that you are irreplaceable. You do not need to argue your case. You do not need to perform or prove or persuade. You just need to be who you are, fully, consistently, honestly. And the right people will recognize it, they will feel it, and they will hold on to it, not because you asked them to, but because they understand that what you offer is rare. That is the quiet power of being someone hard to replace. It does not come from effort directed outward. It comes from depth developed within, and that depth, once created, cannot be taken from you. It is yours. It is built into the fabric of who you are, and it speaks for itself, always, without asking for attention, without demanding recognition, without needing anyone's approval to exist. It simply is, and because it simply is, it endures. That is the kind of value you are building, the kind that lasts, the kind that matters, the kind that makes people pause and realize, quietly and with a sense of something they cannot quite name, that losing you would mean losing something they could not easily find again. Not because you told them so, because they felt it. You have been listening for a while now, and if you have stayed with this audiobook this far, something in you has been responding. Not just to the words, but to the recognition. The recognition that somewhere along the way, you stopped valuing yourself the way you should have. Or maybe you never started. That is not a failure. That is simply where you were, and where you were is not where you have to stay, because something has already shifted. You may not feel it dramatically. There may be no sudden rush of confidence, no lightning bolt of transformation. But something is different now. Something in the way you think about yourself has been rearranged. And that quiet rearrangement is the beginning of everything. You do not need to become a different person. You need to become a more honest version of the person you already are. The version that does not apologize for having standards. The version that does not shrink to make others comfortable. The version that does not chase people who do not choose you. The version that walks through the world with calm, grounded awareness of your own worth. That version of you has always been there, underneath the self-doubt, underneath the people-pleasing, underneath the years of over-giving and under-receiving. It has always been there, waiting for permission to exist. This audiobook is that permission. Not from an external authority, from yourself. You are giving yourself permission to take yourself seriously, to invest in yourself, to hold yourself to a higher standard, to walk away from what diminishes you, to stop performing and start building. And what you are building is not something fragile. It is not something that depends on other people's opinions. It is not something that collapses the moment someone criticizes you or leaves you or fails to recognize you. What you are building is a foundation of character, consistency, discipline, presence, self-respect, and emotional independence that cannot be shaken by external circumstances. A foundation that holds steady in the face of uncertainty. A foundation that allows you to be generous without being depleted, loving without being desperate, open without being exposed. And from that foundation, everything else grows. Relationships become healthier because you are no longer bringing neediness into them. You are bringing wholeness. Career pursuits become more focused because you are no longer chasing approval. You are chasing mastery. Your inner life becomes quieter because you are no longer at war with yourself. You are at peace. And peace, real peace, is the ultimate expression of value, because a person at peace does not react. They respond. They do not scramble. They move with intention. They do not beg for attention. They earn respect through presence alone. That is where you are heading, not toward perfection, toward peace, toward the calm, quiet confidence that comes from knowing who you are and what you stand for, toward the grounded assurance that your value does not fluctuate based on someone else's behavior. You are enough, not because someone told you so, but because you have decided to live in a way that makes it true. And that decision, made daily, made quietly, made without fanfare or announcement, is the most powerful thing you will ever do. Because when you live from that place, when you embody that kind of value, the people around you notice, not because you demanded it, not because you engineered it, but because real value cannot be hidden. It radiates. It fills a room without trying. It touches people without being directed at them. It lingers in conversations and memories long after you have walked away. And when people feel that, when they experience the rare combination of your presence and your peace, They understand something without needing to say it. They understand that you are not someone they can afford to lose. Not because you have threatened to leave, not because you have manipulated them into feeling that way, but because what you bring into their life is real. And real things are irreplaceable, so carry this with you, not as a burden, as a foundation, as a quiet reminder that the work you are doing matters even when no one sees it, that the choices you are making today are shaping the person you will be tomorrow, that every act of self-respect, every moment of consistency, every boundary you honor, every time you choose growth over comfort, you are adding to something that will eventually become undeniable. You do not need to prove your value. You build it, quietly, consistently, and when you become someone who respects yourself, someone who lives with integrity and presence and calm, others begin to feel your absence before you even leave. That is the power you carry forward from this moment. Not the power of control, not the power of manipulation, the power of a life lived with intention. A life that does not beg for attention but commands respect. A life that does not chase people but draws them in through the sheer force of authenticity. You are becoming that person, right now, in this moment, with every word you have absorbed and every truth you have allowed to settle into your bones. Trust the process, trust yourself, and walk forward knowing that the most valuable thing you will ever build is the person you are becoming. Not for anyone else, for you. And from that place, everything else falls into its rightful place, quietly, naturally, as it was always meant to,